ADHD is the most misunderstood disorder today. I feel like most of the YouTube channels focus on, I'm going to give you the number one hack, the number one best thing you can do for ADHD. You ready? I hope that nobody watches this video, because this is my very, very first YouTube video and I'm kind of nervous. ADHD is the most misunderstood disorder today. And I know that's a bold claim, but I'm saying that because it's one of the most talked about disorders. And within that, there's so much misinformation and everyone seems to have an opinion on it. So that's why I wanted to shed some light into the world of misinformation. Now, I know that there's a lot of other channels out there, but I feel like most of the YouTube channels focus on ADHD hacks, or they're very short videos because they think that people with ADHD only have short attention spans, which is not true, and therefore they need bite-sized videos. Now, I'm going to take a little bit of a different approach. I want to use this channel to not only talk about ADHD, but to be honest, life. It's important to talk about more than just how to pay attention, how to not forget to drink water, or how to get out of bed in the morning, how to not be late. Like, all of these things are very important, but I think that there's more to it. Also because ADHD has several comorbidities. So comorbidities means that it's likely that you have other disorders linked in with ADHD. So for example, depression, anxiety, OCD. I know a lot of people who have autism linked with ADHD. They might have one stronger than the other. Bipolar, borderline, like all of these conditions are sort of in one big pool. And it's more like a spider web of a spectrum. I've heard this analogy being used for autism more than for ADHD, but I feel like it just as much applies to ADHD as well. So for example, with autism, a lot of people think of it as on a spectrum, that it's from left to right of intensity, let's say, which is not the case. You can have, autism is just so complex and it's fascinating. And I think that ADHD works in a similar way, whereas I do feel like most people with ADHD that I meet do actually tend to have a lot of the same symptoms. For example, for a while now, I have loved to diagnose people. I know I'm not supposed to, and every time I do, first of all, I ask the person, would you be happy to do this? Like, hey, do you want to do these 20 questions with me? And second of all, I have been telling them, I'm not a medical professional. I just have my own insights, and please do get professional help or like speak to a doctor. But this is the other issue, that most people in the medical field, be it GPs, like doctors, psychologists, psychiatrists. When I was living in Scotland, in Glasgow, there was this mental health centre. I spoke to the head of that centre, meaning highest level of psychiatrist. And even she didn't know a fraction of what I knew about ADHD. She even brought me in. This was a really weird story. She even brought me in because she said, oh, well, so we don't have an update for you regarding medication, but you seem like a really interesting person. So I just wanted to meet you. Because I'm a filmmaker, I've been working in the film industry for years now. And that's what I was doing in Scotland. I was studying film. And she said, oh, so my brother's a filmmaker. Like, how do you find it? And I'm like, I literally dragged myself out of bed to get here, hoping that finally, after months, you would have an update for me regarding medication. But you didn't, and you literally, everything that you told me, you could have told me over the phone. Anyway, I sort of engaged in her questions, and we ended up talking about ADHD. And she was, as many others do, saying, oh, it's overdiagnosed, blah, 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 blah. And I like to sort of test people when it comes to that. When they make statements like that, can they back it up? And usually they can't. So I'd explain to her what I am going to explain to you throughout the course of the next few videos. Completely lost my train of thought. Anyway, this is the thing, is that when you talk to mental health professionals, even the ones that are specialized in ADHD, they often have a lot of blind spots. And this isn't to their own fault. This isn't because they don't care. It's because they're not educated properly. And also the way how the mental health system works. I mean, a good friend of mine, actually, who's the same age as me, just became a doctor. And I'm like, how? I just finished a bachelor in film. Here I am doing YouTube videos, and she has a license to treat people, which is amazing, and she's brilliant, and she's really, really smart. But how much do you expect a person to know about everything? You know, if we start with GPs, you go to your GP and you say, oh, I think I might have ADHD or something. How much are you expecting them to know about it? So the best thing that a GP can do for you is to refer you on to the mental health professionals. But even there, I've had mental health professionals that are mainly focused on depression or anxiety, or they'll do CBT training, which is cognitive behavioral training. And even there, I would have to explain to my therapist how my ADHD works. And the things that she was telling me to do, or the exercises, I told her, well, I struggle with those because of ADHD. And I just so often felt like I was educating my therapists on how to treat me, which shouldn't be the case. That being said, obviously this doesn't apply to all mental health professionals or even all doctors. There are some very, very, very good therapists and coaches out there. I'm really lucky that I found one that really, really works for me. But also, she's not specialized in ADHD. She's specialized more in trauma and depression. And I'm actually not sure what like her main specialty is, but that seems to be her main focus. And for that, she's great. I mean, also for other things, we don't really talk about ADHD as much. Like every now and again, it will come up. But yeah. So long story short, I think that we do heavily rely on the internet to inform ourselves. And the problem with that is that I think, okay, please do not quote me on numbers, but I saw somewhere that the amount of misinformation spread through TikTok videos on ADHD is like over 90%. Like over 90% of TikTok ADHD videos actually contain misinformation. I'm not sure if it's 90, and I'm not sure where this study came from. So quick interlude from my future self. I actually did look it up, and it's nowhere close to 90%. It's about 52%. And this was based on a study that was only looking at the top 100 TikTok videos on ADHD. So yeah, 52, not quite 90%, still a lot though. Yeah, it was just important to me to not spread further misinformation while I'm talking about misinformation. So there you go, let's continue. I see all of these other channels and I feel like, oh, well, they've kind of already said it all. Like, do I really need to make another channel? And I've come to realize, yes, I do. And not because those channels aren't good, but because I want to offer another level. I want to basically do a channel that's a bit more advanced. Like if you want to get the absolute basics, I don't know, maybe I am going to make absolute basic videos. Also interesting to know, let me know in the comments what kind of videos that you would most like to see. Because for me, I've actually stopped watching ADHD videos. I did for a while, or when I'm making a film about a specific topic within ADHD, that's when I'll usually go and look through YouTube or on Instagram and sort of see what information there is. Maybe there's an aspect of it that I haven't heard of before. Hang on. But what I love to do, and the very beginning of the video, I said, I hope no one's watching this. I kind of stole that, and you might already have a suspicion from where. I stole that from one of my favorite podcasts, Diary of a CEO, where he says, I hope no one's listening, and if you are, please keep this to yourself. I'm not sure if he actually I don't think he still says it. He used to in his early episodes when it was more like a diary. And that's kind of what inspired me to make a channel. I want to kind of create a diary type medium to go a little bit further. What I love about it is that he has on really, I mean, from the first episodes to the last episodes, and at the first episodes, it really was just his own sort of self-reflection on certain aspects, which I think was really interesting. Even if those aspects don't all apply to me, I still found it really interesting to hear about someone else's life and introspections. I think that's a key word here, introspections. Also later on, he has on a lot of guests and talks to them about really personal things and goes into a lot of depth. It's not just a how-to podcast or a let's just scrape the surface of this topic, but really dive deep down. And I haven't really found something like that with ADHD. Also, a lot of the ADHD podcasts are run by more medical professionals that are talking about the science behind it and everything, and less so life with ADHD. So that's what I'm going to attempt to provide for you. Basically, I'm making the podcasts that I would love to listen to. I'm going to give you the number one hack. Doesn't mean that the other hacks don't work, but the number one best thing you can do for ADHD. You ready? The best thing you can do for your ADHD is to research. You might not be happy with that answer, but it is honestly the best thing that you can do to help yourself. Like, all of these hacks are great, like Pomodoros, body doubling, setting yourself reminders, using certain productivity tools. That's all great, but it starts with knowledge. And this might be obvious to you, but it might not be to someone else. I know so many people who will just flick through Instagram and be like, oh, that's a cool hack. That's a cool trick. I'm going to try that. Great. Perfect. But also, how much is it really going to help you? Because ADHD affects every single part of your life. The key is to understand what is going on in your brain, which parts of the brain is it happening in, and what are these parts of the brain responsible for? What are all of the symptoms? Not just like surface level, but really do a deep dive. And we're good at this. We're good at going into hyperfocus and going down the rabbit hole. I think the best way to do this is to have a mix of scientific knowledge and sort of social media content creator knowledge, because both of them are important. The studies and the medical journals and whatever, they're also not always accurate. And the thing is that a lot of them are quite old. For example, ADHD in women is way understudied. For the longest time, they didn't even realize that ADHD in women look differently than ADHD in men. Well, actually, girls and boys, because for the longest time, people thought that ADHD would just grow out as you're an adult, which is just not true. We'll get into that some other time, though. It was only, I think, since 2016 that they did studies on people with ADHD who have a menstrual cycle and how the menstrual cycle affects your ADHD. That's insane. 2016. That's when I was graduating high school. My point being, medical journals are great to a certain degree. Don't rely on them to be 100% accurate. Look at the date when it was published, look at who it was published by, and always take it with a pinch of salt. And this is where content creators come in. I feel like content creators, YouTubers, people on Instagram have more of a personal insight into it. And we do a lot of our own research in a way because we've been studying ourselves since whenever we got the ADHD diagnosis, or maybe since we were a child, like I was. I mean, I was lucky enough to be diagnosed when I was 8 years old, but it wasn't until I was like 14, 15 that I really started to dig deeper. I knew it had to do with concentration, hyperactivity, and emotional regulation, but I didn't realize to what extent. And there are so many other things that I did not realize. And knowing all of these symptoms now, and I'm sure that there's still a ton that I don't know of, knowing all of these now has really helped me to, first of all, not judge myself too harshly, because we do that a lot. People with ADHD, well, most people do, but also especially people with ADHD will tend to judge themselves very, very harshly. So it helps with self-esteem to just know, hey, I am not broken. This is part of this disorder, which I can't fix. I can implement strategies to make it better, but there is no cure for ADHD, and I doubt that there ever will be. But that doesn't mean that you need to give up hope. I love certain aspects of ADHD. So we just need to learn how to deal with it to work in the society that we live in. And a lot of people are going to be like, society should just adapt to us, or why should we change? The reason why it's still important to treat our ADHD is because it impacts us negatively and our relationships with other people. So yeah, okay, being late, for example, is like, yeah, it's not the worst thing in the world, theoretically, but there's still often a system around it that needs to function. For example, just before I went to Scotland, I really struggled with getting out of bed, or like going to bed on time and then getting out of bed. And I would oversleep a lot. And at the very end, like on my second last day on set, my supervisor, we lived kind of close by, so we were supposed to meet in the middle, and I was supposed to pick him up with the car. And he has to buzz me out of bed. He literally has to walk to my place because he, I don't know, helped me carry something in, like he knew where I lived. He had to walk to my place, ring the doorbell so that I would wake up. And on the way there, after working with him for 1.5 years and having quite a good working relationship with him, he said to me, you know, we've had to fire people before for being late. And that was just such a punch in the gut. And I felt so horrible for so many different reasons. And of course, that delayed the shoot. So, you know, everyone can say like, oh, we should just be a little bit more lenient. We should be more accepting of people being late. But if other people depend on it, then there's not much else you can do. But that's just like the teensiest, tiniest tip of the iceberg, because emotional regulation, right? I think this is the most important thing that I'm going to say in this whole video. ADHD is wrongly named. ADHD is so misleading. Attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. Those are just some symptoms that come out. But that does not in no way encapture what ADHD really is. The fundamental thing that doesn't work properly is that it is a self-regulation disorder. And that is a really serious disorder. As said by one of my absolute favorite ADHD people, Dr. Russell Barkley, I would absolutely recommend going to check out his work. I'll put a link in the description below to one of his lectures, which is quite old at this point, but I'd still really recommend it. It is like 2 or 3 hours long. You don't have to watch it all at once, but I would really recommend just sort of, I don't know, skim through it, watch as much as you can, because it really helped me. It taught me a lot, and it helped me to take it more seriously as well. Because a self-regulation disorder impacts us in every aspect of our life, as I keep saying. And yes, of course, there could be ways in society that would be a little bit more forthcoming. There are certain, you know, if someone's in a wheelchair, of course, you'll build them a ramp. And it's hard to do that for people with ADHD, but there are ways to improve our situation in society that I think not just ours, but anyone with a neurodivergency. And I am really hoping that I'm seeing a change. I feel like we are starting to move towards that direction, but it's mainly also harming ourselves in so many different ways. For example, a big one that no one knows about is rejection sensitivity dysphoria. I bet if you have ADHD, you probably think the same as what I thought, that if you feel rejected, if it's perceived or real, that you feel immense pain. It's like, oh my God, the world is going to crumble. Or you might think, oh, it's related to your childhood trauma, because people with ADHD are a lot more likely to have bullying experience or some other type of trauma. So we often think that it's linked to that, but actually it's something called rejection sensitivity dysphoria, which isn't a diagnosis by itself. It's part of ADHD, which means that if we experience real or perceived rejection, it goes deep. It's like a punch in the gut. Not everyone feels this way. And if you don't have ADHD and you still feel that way, first of all, maybe you actually do have ADHD and you just don't know about it. Or I could talk about this forever. I'm going to talk about this in a different video. The whole thing about, oh, but I have that too. Does everyone have ADHD? No, they don't. Not treating our ADHD really harms ourselves, which is why knowledge about it, understanding how your brain works, and when those things happen, calling yourself out and being like, I did this ADHD thing, the self-awareness already helps to regulate it to a certain degree. There are lots of other things that you can do, obviously, which I won't go into in this video because it's already getting too long. But yeah, I hope I can somehow edit that together with it making sense, because my thoughts are scrambled. Right, wait, completely, right, that's what I wanted to say. I'm not gonna explain Pomodoro now. I'm literally just like, I'm gonna start talking, and then the words are gonna come out. Take it with a pinch of salt, a grain of salt, pinch of salt. I'm gonna record both so I can figure out which one it is and then edit it in later. Days. I just said nay, that's so weird. I was gonna say something else.
One eternity later.
I can't remember. Anyway.